Good evening. I'd first like to thank the event organisers for inviting me along tonight. I know that a lot of you are here to hear a little bit about publishing tonight. We've got three fantastic presentations, I hope. I'm going to start off by talking about publishing in the digital age. Now, I come from a company called Audience Media. We're a 3.5-year-old company. Hopefully this works. There we go. And we started in Barcelona in 2011. We opened an office here in Ho Chi Minh a week later. And with 0 staff, we've grown to 50 staff in the first 3 years, working with publishers to try and help them solve some of the challenges that they face, moving from a traditional print-based business model into digital. We're now at a position where 3.5 years later, having recently merged with Zinio, the world's largest digital distribution company, we now have staff in 7 different countries, about 180 of them in total. We work with 5,500 different publishers around the world: ESPN, Harvard Business Review, Elle, Condé Nast, the New York Times in 40 different countries. And we sell magazines as well in our distribution channels to more than 34 million people in 205 different countries, and serve about 35,000 of those every minute of every hour of every day all year. So it keeps us pretty busy. And the best thing is we actually did all of that here in Ho Chi Minh with 50 people in the last 3.5 years. So it's been an interesting ride, a lot of fun. But I didn't really want to talk about Audience Media tonight. What I wanted to talk about were the challenges that some of our clients have faced and the reasons that they would want to work with a company like ours, or maybe to highlight some of the challenges that we see publishing companies facing that I think the ad industry and the agencies and a lot of the marketing companies can actually start to influence and help publishers in finding their right way forward with digital media. So, what is the challenge? What should we be doing? Well, actually, here in Asia, the challenge isn't too big yet. Print media is still growing. We are not suffering from the same terrible fate that we've seen befall the US and Europe. I remember in 2008 and 2009, the newspapers were screaming, 35,000 journalists have lost their jobs, newspapers are burning, falling to the ground. Actually, here the ad spend is still growing. But the problem is that the ad spend is very, very quickly moving from print to digital. And the publishing companies are finding it very, very hard to continue to retain that ad spend as it moves into digital properties. They're finding it hard to have the right conversation with the industries, with the advertisers, to explain why their brands are relevant online. I think for publishers, they're finding it hard to work out what relevance means in the digital world. Running their business is now not as simple as it used to be. It's not just a story printed on a page. It actually requires you to understand entirely different audiences in different media with different devices that have different usage profiles. Things that publishers traditionally have not had inside their business. They haven't had the staff to understand how to deal with this. One of the other challenges as well for publishers is that it's not for lack of trying. It's not that the publishers have not tried to build a website in the last 10 years. It's just that 9 times out of 10, they would have considered it unsuccessful. And having been through that 2 or 3 times, it makes it very, very difficult internally to consider how to move forward and how to invest yet again in a project that you feel is going to fail. So I actually think that a lot of this starts back with the team itself and having a real conversation with these businesses about what they should be doing. Now, as I mentioned before, we actually saw the advertising here dip off for a little bit in 2008 and 2009, but this is just in Asia Pacific. And what we see here is a digital ad spend increasing in consumer magazines from 100 million a year in 2007 to more than 500 million here in 2014. It's not a small amount of money. There's still a lot of money here in traditional publishing. The problem is, how do you unlock it and what do you do with it next? We see, obviously, from KPCB, this is a slide that I pulled from 2013, that print spend actually far eclipses time spent in media. We're seeing an ad spend in the US that is 19% versus time spent in media at 5%. What's going to happen to that over the next 5 years? It's going to shrink. and it's going to shrink dramatically. And the publishers know this. The question is, what do you do next? We can see an opportunity here in mobile and in internet, and these numbers will be skewed a little bit towards the US, but this is Asia in 5 years' time. What do publishers do next? I think it all starts with the team. You know, when you start a business like we did, the first thing you do is you build the right team to try and execute on what you're working on. And the biggest challenge for publishers is trying to work out how to strategize print to digital. Now, the first point here is a little bit contentious, but I spend a lot of my time traveling around to publishers, sitting down with their teams and talking to them about what to do next. And probably 8 out of 10 times, they will introduce me to their head of their website, and it will be an intern. That's been employed for about 3 weeks. It's probably the 4th intern for the year. And they might not know a great deal about the brand, but really their job is to copy and paste the content out of the magazine and post it into WordPress or Drupal or something else. And that's really actually the entire digital strategy right there. That sort of encompasses a great deal of the industry, which is a little bit sad. Interns are not digital strategists. I'm sure that there's some people in the room that were great interns, and I don't doubt your abilities. But if you're going to put your best foot forward and you actually want to capitalize on that 500 million ad spend, you don't do it with interns. But what do you do? Well, you actually need to have somebody that can coordinate. But it goes a lot further than that. I've seen a lot of publishing companies that said, don't worry about the interns, we're going to get somebody in to manage the interns. We'll have a digital head. But that's not enough. You know, 5 years ago, it was simple to look at the US and see at Forbes and a number of the big publishers that the newsrooms were at war with each other. They actually sat in physically separate buildings. Digital in this building, print in this building, nothing will cross. We don't talk to each other. It doesn't work. It can't work. You have to tear down those walls. So you've got to actually start your digital strategy right back at content creation. Now, my slides here today are actually focused a lot on print publishers, but this applies to anybody who produces content. This applies to the advertising industry and the marketers that are in the room. This applies to brands who are trying to market their content. As you move forwards, the content that you're distributing is no different than that that's produced for a print magazine. There is no difference at all. The advantage that a lot of brand advertisers have had is that they don't suffer from a 300-year print legacy. They don't have somebody sitting in the room saying, this is how we've always done it. They're willing to do things differently. And this is a really big challenge for publishers, to be able to sit down and think outside the box and say, well, what do we do next? Everybody has to be involved. It starts right at the point where you think about the story. So when you sit down and you say, okay, we're going to write a featurette on Justin Bieber and the new car that he bought, we're going to put it out in 3 months' time. Now's a good time to think about what you're going to do with it online, and in mobile, and in tablet, and in newsletters, and in SMS. Because all of these distribution channels continue to multiply. But the trouble is that it can't be the same approach that we've always had, which is let's just repurpose the content and stick it in the website. That's not going to work. People use devices in a very different way. We have to think a little bit more about how we deliver this content. Right from the beginning, you should be thinking about, what do we do with web? Can we reuse all of the images, the photo shoots that we took that we didn't put into the print magazine and reutilize them for photo galleries? Can we make slideshows? Can we do infographics? Should we go out and film a video? One of the most successful things I've seen done, we were working with a publisher in India. They were launching a brand new magazine. They had no traffic on their website. And their first month, they went from 0 people to 40,000 uniques. And they did it purely by making videos. Videos of their cover shoot. They would take out some guys from university and actually make a video of how they shot the cover images for their magazine. Sometimes those covers are underwater, which actually makes for a really interesting 4-minute video, watching how you take photos in a swimming pool of a lady wearing whatever she is wearing, right? It's actually really interesting, and it takes them from 0 to 40,000 uniques in a month. What did it cost them? Nothing. They were interns. But there was this opportunity there to take people from audiovisual classes at university and say to them, we'll give you the ability to work with one of the leading brands. This is a top 5 women's brand in the world, and work on videos for our website. Just see if it works. And it worked out well for them. In fact, it works out really well for a lot of other clients that we work with as well. But there's more to it than this. It's really coming back to what is the content actually about. One of the biggest challenges that I face with publishers when we sit down and we talk about content strategy is editors think to themselves, I know who reads my magazine. They are 35 to 45-year-old women, they're highly affluent, they have credit cards, they like to travel. They have a mental picture of who reads their magazine. The trouble is you start to challenge these assumptions when you can measure this online. So if I take the same women's brand that launched and I sat down with that publisher 3 months later and said, what do you think's happening on your website? They said, oh, it's going really well. We've got 50,000, 60,000 uniques. Who are they? The same people that always read our magazine. But they're not. They're actually 15 years younger. And in a women's magazine, when you go 15 years younger, you're talking to teenagers. And teenagers don't like to look at adverts for anti-wrinkle cream. So the marketing companies were doing a bad job. Right? And these are all these little things that the publishers don't think about. They don't think about the fact that maybe the audience changes. Maybe the audience changes just going from the website to the mobile phone. Maybe it changes entirely because the utility of the device affects the way that you consume content. You guys know this, you spend all day making ads. But you've got to work out a way to talk to the publishers about this. I sit down with a lot of publishers and say, look, tell me the top 3 reasons why someone buys your magazine. What's the reason that somebody would come into a newsstand, walk past every other magazine and buy yours? And there'll always be 3 reasons. And then you ask the same question again for whether or not somebody would go to your website for the same 3 things, and you'll find out that it's not true. Because these different media give us an opportunity to do entirely different things. It's immediate. The immediacy creates want and need that you can generate on a weekly basis, on a daily basis. If I'm running a women's magazine, I'll continue down that theme. On my website, there's no point for me publishing the events that I had in my print magazine because they're a month old. But why don't I run a newsletter on Friday at 10 a.m. telling you all the hot spots to go out in Ho Chi Minh on Friday evening, and watch how much more traffic you'll generate, watch how much more engagement you'll get, watch how much more you can sell advertising into these distribution models if you think about how you package your content in different ways. How do my readers actually want to receive this content? This is actually important as well, because when you sit down and you study how people read, they read different content and consume different content at different times. Now, if you sit down with publishers, typically they're not thinking about things like this. They send their newsletter out on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Always. There isn't a reason why, it's just because that's the way that we've done it since we've had a newsletter. But then when you're sending out things to do on the weekend on Tuesday, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So you actually have to start to think about what content you have and what you're targeting and when you're actually delivering it to people. When we start to dig into the web, is this just a copy of our print articles? What decision are you asking me to make if I already read you in print and you put the same thing online? Especially if you put it online for free. Will I pay $6 for it or will I read it for free? It's not much of a decision, right? You have to think about how you create a compelling experience. You have to understand that maybe the audience is slightly different. Maybe this is an audience building exercise. But the brand still has gravitas, it always does. People go searching for Elle, they go searching for Cosmopolitan, they go searching for Epicurious. They're interested in specific content. The brands still have that power. It's just about working out the best way to surface the content, which is really what it's all about. This isn't really even meant to be here. There isn't a discussion about whether or not your website should be responsive. 45% of traffic in Asia is on mobile phones. Case closed. Simple. The bigger question would be whether or not it should be on the web at all or whether it should be in an app. And this is something that publishers continue to struggle with. Do I put it in iOS? Do I put it in Android? Do I put it on Windows Phone? What happens about Amazon? What happens about the Kindle? What happens about the Samsung Play Store? We're actually in this lucky position where we sell a lot of magazines on iPads and on Android and on Kindle, so I actually have an answer to this, but we'll talk about it later when we're having a drink. But there is money here. There is a lot of money here. It's just working out how to capture that audience. And you have to understand as well, and this is something that I think a lot of publishers and a lot of brand owners don't realize, is that this is about audience building. It will never be the same audience that you had in print. The crossover is about 15%, maybe 20% depending on the brand. 15%. So you've got to work out how you can invest in building an entirely new brand. We see tablet is still growing, continues to grow, but the costs are just way too high. At the end of the day, all of this comes down to execution. And I'm going to skip through these last slides because I've been told I've taken too long, but what I would say to you is, at the end of the day, really this is about something really simple. You have to set goals. You have to execute, rinse and repeat. This is the biggest challenge that all brand marketers, that all publishers have suffered time and time again, is they try it for 3 months, it didn't work, give up, try something different. There's got to be more of a strategy behind it than that. It just isn't that simple. There is a lot of opportunity here, but the biggest thing always, the content that I see sell, because we sell 250 million magazines a year, is that the experience has to deliver on the promise. If you want somebody to pay for it, it has to be worth paying for. Thank you.